On the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, John McMullen here on 97.3 ESPN. McMullen, what's your take on Kevin Love? Do you think he could help the Sixers?
Well, no. That's not how this whole thing started. The whole thing started, John, is if you trade a first-round pick for Kevin Love.
Yeah, no. The Sixers' first-round pick's going to be in the 20s. So would you?
But that's the thing. It's not would he help. It's would you trade something for him?
No. You're saying he stinks and doesn't help the team. I'm saying I disagree.
No. The whole thing. See, this is what happens, John.
I think he would help the team. I think he would help the team, and I'd trade a pick in the 20s for him.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, if you're talking about a high-level pick.
No, but by the way, the caveat is as well, Love is making way too much money. So I didn't realize he signed that new deal that paid him all this money. I thought he was like coming to the end of that deal. I didn't realize he reworked that. They extended him. So it's a moot point here. But the conversation was that I think he would be a great fit as the fifth option on this team. He's behind Embiid, Simmons, Butler, and Redick.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what they need somebody to stretch the floor, and he can shoot the basketball and also rebound a little bit. So, yeah. I mean, when you bring finances into it, it becomes much more difficult. As a player, would he help that team? Yeah, that's exactly what they need, somebody who can stretch the floor and shoot like a Ilyasova. They haven't been able to replace him or Bellinelli, and they need shooters.
Yeah, but I mean, Ilyasova, his ability to defend isn't anywhere near what a banged-up and aging Kevin Love. Love happens to be the worst.
Love's not a good defender. Dario Saric was an awful defender.
Love's worse than Dario.
Well,
I don't know.
Those rebounds, I don't know how you...
Every time, this is what I would tell Mike. I don't understand Sixers fans because they fall in love with Dario Saric, who was just so bad in that series last year defensively. And when he's not making shots for you, I would tell Mike this all the time, he would just kill you. And every time, all of those games except for one were close in the fourth quarter. In every single game, Brad Stevens would put Al Horford on, who would torture Dario Saric. And it's like nobody recognized it. It's bizarre to me.
John,
I said awful defender.
John, I said earlier that Dario did not deserve a standing ovation from fans last night. So that should tell you that Love, I'm not talking about Kevin Love, but the term of endearment is nowhere near my brain when it comes to Dario Saric. But Kevin Love right now, injured and needing volume just to put up points, is a guy who, if he can't knock down 3 or 4 shots in limited time, is going to kill you on the other end of the floor.
Well, yeah, as I said, they're all bad defenders. So, I mean, that's the difficulty with trying to put together a winning team.
All right, how about this? Enes Kanter or Kevin Love? Forget the finances.
Well,
both help you in different ways, right?
I think Kanter's a better player at this point, but I don't know about where he would fit on this team.
Well, you'd have to ask him to come on.
I think you have to understand, and this is what back in the day Larry Brown was able to understand, and really nobody else with Allen Iverson. If you have pieces that are really, really high level, you have to build around them, but you have to build around them properly. And if you have Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, you need shooters.
No question. All right. I want to get into some football here. All right, John, here we go. We know what's going to happen. 10-10 XL Jacksonville believes that the hiring of John DeFilippo means that Nick Foles, that they will make an aggressive play. Now, I only bring this up because Shander last week tried to rip down the possibility of Jacksonville being able to afford Foles. And this is the conversation we had, that it doesn't matter if they're how far over the cap or where they are in the cap. If they want Nick Foles, they're going to go after him.
Wait a second.
It appears that
you're correlating the assumed hiring of John DeFilippo to roster movement. I mean, that's a pretty big leap.
I did not make that assertion. 10-10 Jacksonville made that, and if you check Twitter today, so has everybody else, John. DeFilippo going there. Now they're connecting the dots to Foles.
Yeah, I mean, it's natural, and everybody's obviously going to jump on that bandwagon. It's not – they didn't hire John DeFilippo to go after Nick Foles. I think it's just an easy sort of clickbait thing for everybody to do. They obviously have to upgrade the quarterback position, and Nick, like everybody else who's available, will be in that conversation. But the issue from Philadelphia's standpoint is how do you handle this situation? Can you handle this situation? Is Nick Foles just going to simply opt out and choose to go the free agency route? And I think a lot depends on what the rest of this league thinks about Nick Foles. Obviously, people in this town think more highly of him than most people around this league. I think we can all agree on that. So if you talk about what he's going to make next year, is it going to be $20 million? A lot of people have thrown out Case Keenum's contract, which is 18 plus incentives. Is it going to be in that range? Could it possibly be up to 25, which would be right near the franchise tag? I can't imagine that. And then if you're willing to pay Nick Foles, say, $20+ million, are you also going to be willing to give up significant draft capital to the Eagles to get him? I don't know. I think this is going to be real difficult for the Eagles to try to get something. And I think ultimately he just hits free agency, signs where he's going to sign, and the Eagles get a compensatory pick in 2020.
I was going to say, if Jacksonville was, legitimate, like if DeFilippo's there and he says, look, I love Nick, we can work with him, let's make something happen here, does that then signal the Eagles to franchise him and then try to trade with Jacksonville? Is that how that would get done?
No, that's what I said. I can't imagine that happening for a couple of reasons. The main reason is because I don't think anybody wants to pay Nick Foles franchise tag money. The second part is you're rolling the dice from both standpoints. If you're the Eagles and you tag Nick Foles, well, what if he signs immediately? What if he signs the contract and you're stuck with 1 year, whatever it ends up being, $25 million? So you can still trade him, but that team that you're trading him to understands they're only getting him for a year, and then he's back in a free agency. So that kind of muddles things up from one point of it. And then the second part of it is, why do you, if you're another team, if you're Jacksonville or somebody else, why do you want to pay a guy $25 million and give up a second-round pick or a third-round pick or whatever these fans think Nick Foles is worth? A lot of them think he's worth a first-round pick. Why would you do that? I don't think the franchise tag is an option.
You think this guy can get upwards to more than 25, 28, something like that on the open market?
I think a lot of people, a lot of the finance people around this league have continued to throw out Case Keenum's deal as a potential sort of template for Nick Foles in free agency, and that was $18 million plus some incentives that could get it up to $20 million. So when you start talking about 25, that's Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr territory. And you can argue those guys aren't deserving of that money, and I probably agree with you, but they have a better skill set. And at the time when they signed their deals, certainly people looked at them as higher-level quarterbacks than Nick Foles. So I can't imagine he would get up near 25.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest thing is the shock value of not moving on from Nick Foles, but just the open market and what it dictates. Do you think that there will be negative reaction from the Eagles if they don't, like if that scenario plays out and all they get is a compensatory pick? Meaning people would look at Howie Roseman, Joe Douglas, oh, you should have traded him. Not hindsight from last year where the three of us agreed, but some sort of scenario that could have played out?
No, yeah, I think they'll get some blame because people overvalue him and people don't understand the landscape. If you go back to last year, I would have these same discussions with Mike, and everybody's looking for first-round picks. And then to make things worse, you have somebody like Bill Polian going on saying it should start at 2 first-round picks. And then behind the scenes, you have so many different options. There were so many free agents on the market. There were so many 6 projected guys who could potentially go in the first round. So that's how crowded you are in the spring. Everybody has different options. So why are they going to give up 2 first-round picks for a guy who had a 3-game run, or even a first-round pick? And that came to fruition. It's just really, really difficult. Now, this year, it's probably not as crowded. There's not as many first-round projected picks. There's not as many people on the free agency market. But there's still options. Mm-hmm. Joe Flacco, I think it's going to stun people how much Joe Flacco gets.
Who are you spending your money on, Foles? Who are you spending your money on, Foles or Flacco?
I'll tell you right now, I think Joe gets more.
Think he gets more money?
I think that's going to stun people. And a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, who you could get much cheaper than either of them. People like that on the open market. Nick Foles has more value for Philadelphia because of Doug Peterson and this offense, and they figured out how to use Nick Foles than other organizations. I firmly believe that, and most are smart. The good news is it only takes one dumb one, and maybe they do overpay, and that's what the Eagles got to hope on.
Sports Bash, John McMullen with us talking a little football. You know, we talked a lot about Foles obviously yesterday and the possibility, but what was his and DiFilippo? Because I don't, did they have a relationship where you could see that happening, where Foles would be accepting and willing to maybe take less money to be the starter to go there, or do you think that is a fit?
Yeah, I mean, they got along, and Nick gave John a ton of credit for sort of remaking the offense when he struggled late in the regular season, and they had the bye week, and then they showed up for Atlanta, and they used a lot more RPOs. It was John who was given that responsibility from Doug Peterson and Frank Reich to go to Nick Foles as his position coach, as the guy who worked with him day to day. And they said, look, what are you comfortable doing? What do you like to do? What do you think you can be successful at? And they sort of morphed the offense, and it worked. So, Nick has a lot of respect for John DiFilippo, and I think vice versa. And it would be a good fit. I just don't know how you take advantage of it from the Eagles' standpoint.
Carson Wentz has to be the happiest guy in the building once Nick Foles is gone, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's human nature. Carson kind of admitted this when he finally talked to us.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it, right, John?
Yeah. Well, you have this sort of – and by the way, Nick is in this category as well, and so is Nate Sudfeld. And they, all three of them kind of wear their faith on their sleeves, and they talk about the brotherhood in that room and how they support each other. But then there is the human nature, and Carson kind of admitted it with the injuries. And he had a few moments where he said, why is this happening to me again? And so, I mean, you could tell it started to creep in his mind that why does this team play so successfully under Nick Foles, and it wasn't as successful. But even that is kind of short-sighted because this team was awfully successful under Carson Wentz in 2017, and the only reason they got into a position to have home field advantage throughout the playoffs, which ended up being so key, was because of how they played under Carson Wentz. So I think if you take a step back and look at it logically, it's not nearly as skewed as people make it out to be.
Let me ask you this, John. Do they like Sudfeld to be the backup, or would they need to upgrade that spot?
Kevin Love.
No, I think they project him to be the backup. They like him. You can tell, if you look at Carson, Nick, and Nate Sudfeld, you can tell the Eagles have a type. They're all 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", tall, lengthy quarterbacks. That's what they like. And Nate fits that mold, and I think the projection is that he's going to be the backup next year. But also remember, he's a restricted free agent. And so the Eagles have some work to do with him as well.
The plot thickens.
Yeah, exactly. So they'll tender him, but if there's another quarterback desperate team out there, they could sign him to an offer sheet and make it very, very difficult for the Eagles.
That should be something to keep an eye on. I didn't realize he was a restricted free agent, Sudfeld, but I mean, I guess they have the first shot to bring him back. We'll see if somebody likes him enough to throw some money his way. You know, crazy things happen with quarterbacks, and you see it with coaches. You know, if you know McVay, if you shook his hand once, you get a job interview. If you're on the Doug Peterson staff in that quarterback room, somebody might go a little bonkers.
Yeah, well, did you see Howie Roseman at the press conference yesterday? Even he was sporting the 5 o'clock shadow. Everybody wants to be Sean McVay. And I think it's got more to do with his wife, as I always say, than his football acumen.
Well, then if that's the case, isn't Jeff Garcia at the top of the mountain?
That's true. That's a good point, Eitan. It's a very good point. That was a glory period for the Eagles as far as wives and girlfriends.
Oh, man. There's no way to dispel any rumors for whatever reason people had issue. I'm not saying that I do. I'm just saying people did. About your perceived sexuality than walking out with her, huh? My goodness.
Yeah, and not that there's anything wrong with that.
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying. But people were questioning, and next thing you know, it was just idiots, morons were, and then you saw him out there, and you thought, all right, well, shame on anybody questioning.
Well, and it's a situation similar where people loved Garcia, and the Eagles recognized that they could not bring him back, and him and Donovan McNabb could not be on the same roster together.
Yeah, but that was more about, John, let me ask you that. Based off Mike's point, which was accurate, and I agree with him, at the time, how much of it was, I feel like it was more weighted on McNabb than economics, as opposed to this.
Yeah, well, and I think Donovan was a different personality than Carson Wentz as well. Although I hey, Donovan to this day has an issue with people booing him at the draft. I mean, so that kind of set the stage for what was a pretty sensitive player. Didn't see that early with Carson Wentz, but I will tell you this. He is getting more and more, I don't want to say sensitive, but you can sense some things that, and as I said, he mentioned himself that he was saying, why is this happening to me with the injuries and things of that nature. So everybody, these are all human beings. So when somebody else goes in and succeeds at your particular position, you're going to get a little sensitive.
John McMullen, I want to ask you a couple quick questions regarding some things nationally here. What are the possibilities that you believe that the two Steelers will be gone, Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown?
Very good. It's pretty amazing how good, how explosive that team was and where they're going to be probably after this offseason because – look, it's evident. I mean, Le'Veon Bell sat out for a reason. He's not going back to the Steelers. And they're not making up with Antonio Brown. So they're both gone. And if you think about sort of the triplets and everybody goes back to those Dallas Cowboys, the Steelers kind of had the modern version. And two of the three are going to be gone, and all you got left is the aging quarterback.
Yeah. Something to keep an eye on because, yesterday the Eagle fans were already texting into us, hey, you got to sign Le'Veon Bell this offseason. Why not trade for Antonio Brown? The offseason is here, man. It's the crazy time.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a team. Remember, and Howie and Jake Rosenberg as well are brilliant at manipulating the salary cap. But when we start this thing, and I think March 13th, is the new league year. They're one of two teams over the salary cap. They don't have a lot of wiggle room. I think they have to address the running back position finally and bring somebody in. But I don't know if they're going to be in the ballpark to where they can compete for a player like Le'Veon Bell, and certainly not both of them, Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown.
All right, John McMullen, we'll get more into these games on tomorrow's show. Friday as well, more NFL. The offseason for the Eagles is here. For more on the Eagles offseason, 97.3 ESPN.com. Thank you, John.
All right, thanks, guys.